It's the meth making you crazy, dog.
Both of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a fucking ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet. Go fuck yourself.
How much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks the borders of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Mic check. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's start with headlines and then go into more specific stories.
The White House said it warned Qatar just prior to the attack, but Qatar said it only received notice.
This is it. What do you mean the war can't spread to other regions? This is what it is. This is what spreading to other regions looks like. Occupying parts of Lebanon. Planning for this greater Israel project. What makes you think World War III hasn't already started? And if it doesn't, and if it's because you just don't think it looks like a war in the traditional sense, I would challenge you to try to imagine if World War II were to happen today, what would that look like? It would look like this.
From the U.S. as the capital was being hit by Israeli strikes. On social media, Trump wrote, quote, "I view Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the U.S. and feel very badly about the location of the attack." Trump spoke yesterday.
I'm not thrilled about
He has a way with words, doesn't he?
the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said yesterday Qatar's mediation efforts were central to its identity and that the Israeli attack will not deter its diplomatic role.
The Israeli attack that took place today on Qatari soil, we cannot call it anything other than state terrorism practiced by someone like Netanyahu in the context of these systematic policies and his ongoing attempts that have destabilized regional security and stability. It's simply a clear message to the region as a whole.
For more, we're joined by Jeremy Scahill, co-founder of Dropsite News. His latest piece is an exclusive headlined "The 100-Word Ceasefire Proposal Trump Sent Hamas." Jeremy's a former senior reporter and correspondent at The Intercept. Jeremy, welcome back to Democracy Now! If you can just first respond to Israel bombing Qatar, trying to assassinate the Hamas leadership, which apparently it did not succeed in doing.
Well, first of all, Amy, let's remember that Qatar houses U.S. Central Command and is part of this security umbrella that Donald Trump spoke about, including recently when he made his trip around these Gulf countries. So the idea that the United States was just informed of this at the last minute, Trump said, oh, the U.S. military informed him, and then he scrambled to try to let Qatar know. And he said, my special envoy, Steve Witkoff, I told him to call Qatar, but oops, he did it too late and the bombing had already happened. That's not a believable narrative at all. I think it's important to back up because the context of the lead up to this over the past year is almost never mentioned in Western media. It's as though history begins each time the U.S. or Israel make an ultimatum, and those ultimatums are aimed at trying to blame Hamas for a continuation of this war of extermination against the Palestinians. Last summer, in July of 2024, the United States was engaged in negotiations with Hamas. Hamas on July 2nd accepted a ceasefire deal. This is in 2024, the summer of 2024, that they were told that the United States had signed off on, and that if Hamas agreed to certain amendments, that Israel was going to be on board. And in the midst of those discussions, Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, who was actually the last democratically elected prime minister of Palestine, not just of Gaza, and he was Hamas's political leader and its chief negotiator, and they assassinated him. And then nothing happened with the ceasefire until Donald Trump was running for election, and he and Joe Biden then endorsed a ceasefire that, by all accounts, Trump sort of pushed through with Netanyahu that went into effect in January. Israel blew up that deal on March 2nd, unilaterally exited it, imposed a full spectrum siege on Gaza, barring any food, medicine, or other life essentials from entering the Gaza Strip. On March 18th, it then resumed its genocidal campaign of terror bombings against Gaza that have endured to this moment. Then, a couple of months ago, Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, and Benjamin Netanyahu said that Hamas must accept what they called the Witkoff framework, which was a 13-point plan for a 2-month ceasefire during which half of the living Israeli captives would have been released, and there would have been negotiations on ending the war. It was a very difficult framework for Hamas because it came very close to crossing some of the red lines that Hamas had defined, that it felt that if it agreed to these terms, it would effectively amount to a surrender of the Palestinian cause of liberation. But on August 18th, just over 3 weeks ago, Hamas formally agreed to what mediators said was 98% of the terms that had been demanded by Netanyahu and Trump. Israel did not respond to that in any formal way. Trump and Israel then escalated their threats against Hamas after they accepted it. And Amy, by the way, Hamas made unprecedented concessions that include not demanding a clear timeline for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Philadelphia corridor in southern Gaza. That was a huge deal for Hamas. They reduced the number of Palestinian captives held by Israel that would be released in a deal. They dropped their demand that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this scheme run by the United States and Israel, some 2,000 Palestinians have died seeking aid since the GHF went into effect. Hamas dropped its demand that the GHF be expelled from Gaza as part of a peace deal, and it was willing to accept a full circle buffer zone totally around the Gaza Strip that would be controlled by Israel and at points would pierce 1,500 meters deeper into Gaza. So Hamas made these concessions and then they waited. And the response from Netanyahu was to announce a final solution plan for Gaza City. And they began ratcheting up the terror bombings. They continued to burn children alive in tents. And then they started bombing massive residential apartment towers in Gaza, some of which housed hundreds of Palestinian families. All of this happened, Amy, after Hamas had accepted a proposal filled with concessions that the mediators said was 98% of the demands from Netanyahu and Trump. And then last week, the United States began some back-channel discussions with Hamas, and they said, listen, Donald Trump wants to end this war. He's has some ideas, and Trump's idea, I was told by senior Hamas officials, was that as an initial gesture, Hamas would release all of the Israeli captives living and dead, and then Trump would see if he could do something about restarting negotiations to try to end the war. Well, Hamas responded to this in a remarkably diplomatic way. They said they're open to any proposals, either a comprehensive deal where all captives would be released at once at the beginning of a deal, if there were proper international guarantees and a guarantee that Israel would stop the genocide and withdraw, or they were open to returning to the original framework that they agreed to, which was packed full of concessions. So Trump then submits, and we obtained it, a 100-word summary. And it says within 48 hours, all the Israelis have to be released in exchange for some Palestinians. It says that Israeli withdrawal will be contingent upon a new government acceptable to Israel being imposed on Gaza, and that Israel will maintain full security control of the Gaza Strip. It says that aid will be allowed in, but it doesn't say.
So many martyrs. But I mean, is there any question about who the onus is on to stop the violence? Is there any question? is all Israel.
Who will allow the aid in, or how much aid would be allowed in. And it says that Trump will guarantee for 60 days that a ceasefire will hold as long as negotiations are continuing.
Israel and the United
this
States.
violates so many of Hamas's red lines, but their response to Trump was, we're open to any deal. And I'm told by sources from within Hamas that part of what they were meeting to discuss at the time of this bombing was the idea of posing to Trump a series of questions and clarifications, because a 100-word document does not form a ceasefire agreement when you're facing down a genocide. And so the basic fact is this: 3 weeks ago, they agreed to concessions. Everyone ignored it. Trump then issues a new ultimatum in the form of a 100-word document. They're meeting to discuss it, and then Israel bombs the Hamas offices in a sovereign nation, Qatar, that houses U.S. Central Command. No air defense systems were activated. The United States security umbrella was nowhere to be found. And then Trump concocts this story about how Steve Witkoff was just a little bit too late in informing Qatar that this happened. So what we see here is part of a long pattern of Israel assassinating the very people, or attempting to assassinate the very people that the President of the United States claims he wants to negotiate with. They tried to kill the very people that would have been sitting across the table in these negotiations.
Jeremy, I wanted to ask you the
time for talk is over. Max Blumenthal had an incredible little bit that he did.
And Israel's name for its unprovoked attack on Iran on June 13th of this year was inspired by Game of Thrones. I think it was the Hebrew term for red wedding. So they're not even hiding it. Israel immediately Netanyahu sent his biggest stenographer in the media, Amit Segal, out to claim that the Trump administration had been exploiting negotiations to buy Israel time for this unprovoked attack, and that the negotiations were actually orchestration with Israel. I'm talking about Iran. And now we see the same scenario playing out, where Trump was basically handed this 100-word proposal by the Israelis. It went back to Hamas unchanged. Of course, Hamas was going to agree to some form of it. They had just agreed to the last proposal, and then Israel said, well, too bad, we don't care. But this time, the point of the proposal and Trump's warning to Hamas that they had better accept it was to force Hamas to get its international negotiating team together in a neutral third country so they could be targeted. And the U.S.-controlled air defenses in Qatar stood down. The Patriot batteries require U.S. operation, and they just stood down, allowed Israeli jets to operate in the airspace with British surveillance and refueling tankers in the air right over Qatar. And they attempted to assassinate the entire Hamas negotiating team in a fairly densely populated civilian neighborhood near schools at a time when school was getting out. The Israelis have now come out. They immediately told the Jerusalem Post that the Trump administration gave this a green light. And what was Trump going to do? Say no to the forces that completely control his administration? So there's no more negotiations. Israel's moved beyond that. They're not even pretending to negotiate anymore just to buy themselves time. They're in final solution mode in Gaza, and they're ready to kill everybody who was on the other side of the table.
Now, Israel apologists are saying, well, this is on Hamas because they keep rejecting the ceasefire. I don't know what planet those assholes are on, but what are they talking about? Because Hamas has repeatedly offered to return all remaining hostages in exchange for Israel's removal from Gaza. So what are these people? Can you follow that logic at all? I'm asking you to explain, idiots, but what do you think they're talking about?
Well, they're lying because Rubio and the Trump administration lie every time Hamas accepts a ceasefire proposal. Israel rejects it, walks away, and Rubio provides cover for Israel because the U.S. functions as Israel's lawyer. That's all there is to it. Hamas has accepted the last 3 ceasefire proposals, and they've been accepting proposals since at the late, one early sequence I can think of is May 2024. And then Blinken allowed Israel to blow it up. In Gaza, they referred to a series of massacres that took place this year as the Witkoff massacres, because Hamas gave up Idan Alexander, the American hostage, one of their biggest pieces of leverage in direct negotiations with Steve Witkoff and his team. And in exchange, Israel conducted a series of massacres across Gaza City and Khan Yunis, executing fire belts with F-16 and F-35 jets in residential areas. And so they call that the Witkoff massacre. They were tricked by Steve Witkoff into giving up leverage, and in return, they got massacred. So this happens again and again. And
I think I said this last stream, just like how they're lining people up the GHF to murder them. They're lining people up to do fake ceasefire negotiations to murder them.
People you're referring to just look to the Trump administration as the arbiter of truth, which means they're living in an alternate reality.
It's cowardly. It's a crime against humanity. It's pathetic.
Yeah. I'm just confused where Qatar fits into all of it. What will the relationship be like going forward? Anya Parampil, you know her well. She tweeted earlier. I reposted it. I mean, is it like an empty suit country now, basically? Like it's like I don't know. It's like Stockholm syndrome or something. You're just like allowing these people to like build bases in your backyard and direct weapons to attack your own people in your backyard. Like, what happens with Qatar now?
Well, Qatar was sort of a series of breakaway families from the monarchic kingdom that was established by the British in Saudi Arabia and in the Persian Gulf area. And so in order to protect themselves as a state, they play sort of oppositional politics. They've emerged as a negotiator. They have 12 active negotiations going. They pump hundreds of millions of dollars into Washington and now the Trump administration to obtain influence. And they allow the U.S. to operate the largest military air base in the region. There are 10,000 U.S. soldiers at Al Udeid Air Base, and the air base is there to consolidate Qatar's relationship with the U.S., which protects them from a Saudi takeover. The Saudis attempted a siege on Qatar in 2017, and it also protects their oil fields. In exchange, they just subordinate themselves and their entire country to the U.S., and they're not a real country. They're a neo-colonial carve-out that consists of a small coterie of extremely wealthy royals, oil fields, a slave class that provides all the services, Al Jazeera, and the U.S. military base. And so what power do they really have to resist the U.S. at this point? This is the warning that Hassan Nasrallah, the late leader of Hezbollah, made to all of the Gulf kingdoms, that at some point they are going to come for you too, no matter how much you bend the knee to U.S. and British empire. And now we see that happening. And they will also come for Turkey and Egypt. In fact, Israel just attacked yesterday in Palmyra, Syria, a Turkish military base. Turkey was setting up a base to train the soldiers of the new Syrian government of Ahmed al-Sharaa. And Israel apparently attacked Tunis, in the port of Tunis, and staged a drone attack against Greta Thunberg's boat, her flotilla boat that was in port. Remember, Israel attacked in 1985, 40 years ago, in Tunis to send a commando team to kill PLO officials. And now, 40 years later, they're attacking Greta Thunberg. I mean, this really shows the psychotic direction that Israel's moving in, and also the all-encompassing global war that it's waging on all fronts to compel complete subservience and submission before its regime.
We have a lot of haters who followed you here and are calling you a Hamas supporter, so I'm sure that's brand new.
Yeah.
And hurtful to your feelings. We get that too. Something I want to understand is Saudi Arabia has said they condemn this. Way to wake up. Where have they been all along, and are they going to do anything about it?
They'll issue sternly worded statements, and I think they should see the writing on the wall. Israel's doing this partly as a message to Saudi Arabia: normalize or die, because Mohammed bin Salman has said that he will not normalize until Israel recognizes a Palestinian state, which they will never do. The Israeli Knesset has even passed a bill blocking any Palestinian state from ever being recognized. And so Israel's basically saying, you're next. We could kill you next. And if you do not normalize, which is normalization is code for submission and subservience, and the United Arab Emirates has already done that, then horrible things can happen to you. So this is a message to everyone, Jordan as well. And I think Egypt has a big problem on its hands too. I mean, Egypt is in a cold peace with Egypt, which was secured through the 1979 Camp David Accords. Egypt has basically given up. It was once sort of the center of Arab nationalism and Arab resistance to Israel. However, it has a strong military. I mean, it's a U.S. provided, U.S. supplied military, but it's the last Arab military capable of competing with Israel's. And Israel's final solution in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing of Gaza to complete the genocide, is contingent on Palestinians being pushed out through the Rafah checkpoint, just like a constant flood of Palestinians going into the Sinai Desert. And Egypt will never allow that. I think Saudi Arabia would be deeply concerned about that too, because the Saudi population and Saudi civil society won't accept it. And so Israel will begin to turn up the heat on Egypt as well. And I could actually see that leading to armed conflict at some point in the future. We're witnessing something, a process that I never thought I would see in my lifetime that could actually lead to Israel's demise, but not until after Israel realizes the position it's seeking as regional hegemon.
Yeah.
I wanted to get, before we get you out of here, Max, well, first of all, people are questioning this Greta Thunberg story.
Why? It's on video, you know, like, are you questioning it? Saying
I don't want to allow you to respond to it, but earlier we saw there was video released, I don't know if you were aware of it or not, that it looks like there was a flare launched from her own boat.
Shut up, bro.
The international community is condemning Israel's airstrikes on Hamas political leaders, and it's not clear at this point whether the peace process can even be salvaged.
Fox News senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palkot has more from Tel Aviv.
Officials in Qatar are assessing the damage after Israeli airstrikes hit the Hamas political leadership on Tuesday. It's
I'm never surprised by anything, especially when it comes to the Middle East. I'll be giving a full statement tomorrow, but I would tell you this: I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect. And
it's now up to Qatar to decide how it wants to react against the US. Given its past slavery and lack of self-respect, it's highly unlikely that it will have the courage to do anything meaningful. What's the point of having such wealth, high rises, and having one of the most powerful global media brands in Al Jazeera if you get
The international community is condemning Israel's airstrikes on Hamas.
This looks interesting. I'm going to use the bathroom real quick. Be right back.
We're not going to get a signed affidavit from like the CIA or, you know, any intelligence agency talking about Epstein, including Israel's. So what are we left with? Well, we have to look at what is ultimately, you know, I guess circumstantial evidence, but you stack enough of it over the decades, you know, you can show that something shady is definitely going on.
Whitney Webb recently exposed Jeffrey Epstein's undeniable connections to intelligence services in the past in matters beyond child sex trafficking, actually money laundering and arms trafficking, and she answers the question as to why this is never brought up in relation to Epstein in mainstream conversations. She's the author of One Nation Under Blackmail, in my estimation, the best book on Epstein, so let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And Epstein during that time, you know, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by like very fancy, like aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think that is, it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade. Because, well, yeah, because that narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing, you know, in his early history, for example.
Yeah, I generally agree. If you look at Epstein's past, the money laundering aspect and arms trafficking aspect is just as prevalent in his life and influences as the child sex trafficking and the blackmail operation potentially. So she's exactly right about that. Adnan Khashoggi was kind of a playboy from Saudi Arabia. The prototypical playboy, had expensive yachts and a harem, and he was involved in the Israeli side of Iran-Contra, moving weapons between the United States and Israel to fund the Contras. And, you know, that's undeniable. And it is true that Epstein advertised himself as a guy that was a bounty hunter. He had learned money laundering schemes at Bear Stearns. We know that to be true. So I agree with her. This narrative that he was a bumbling idiot when it came to those things, I think is actually wrong.
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Is this the arms trafficking?
Yeah, among other things. So,
okay, can we go back further, just for people who don't understand? How did he become a thing? Because wasn't he?
No one really knows, but it all seems to have started with this backpacking trip to Europe in 1971, and this was when he was a college dropout. I think he went to Cooper Union, I think, for a few years, didn't finish. And then started at NYU in 1971 and through 74, but didn't get a degree, something like that. Somewhere in 1971, he went backpacking to Europe, and he was in the UK. And so in the UK, he became close friends with this famous cellist, Jacqueline Dupree. And reportedly, he claimed through her got sort of an in with the royal family at that point. I don't really know if that's true, but he comes back from that backpacking trip, and he's hanging out at Jimmy Goldsmith's house. And Jimmy Goldsmith is an interesting figure. If you are a fan of Adam Curtis documentaries, you may remember him from the Mayfair set. He is a currency speculator, or was. He was very close to Robert Maxwell, among other figures. He was a member of this very interesting nexus in Mayfair called the Claremont Club, which was sort of this elite gambling club that a lot of interesting figures were tied to, including figures with intelligence links, organized crime links, and sex blackmail links. So, for example, if you're familiar with the Profumo affair in UK politics, the nexus responsible for that, which brought down the government of Harold Macmillan, has its nexus at the Claremont Club.
Yeah, this was called playing the box, and this is a skill that, Epstein learned from someone, whether it was from the Claremont Club or from Adnan Khashoggi, this idea that if you commit crimes and violate the law, but you do it in a manner that embarrasses others, such that charges won't be brought against you, and it's particularly embarrassing to other people when it's in accordance with what you did, that's how you can get away with crimes. And that's what Epstein employed throughout his career, whether it was on the arms trafficking and the money laundering side or, all other sides.
And Jimmy Goldsmith was a member of that, along with people that were also very close to Robert Maxwell, like Roland, or Tiny Roland, as he's remembered. And another well-known member is David Sterling, who basically started a lot of this movement, the private mercenary phenomena in Britain, among other things. So definitely a network of powerful people, and a lot of Epstein's early high society New York contacts, his earliest ones, a lot of them met him at Jimmy Goldsmith's mansion in New York.
Note that he had only made, maybe a few $100,000 at Bear Stearns when he worked his way up from the trade desk to become a partner of the firm, I think in something like 4 years. And he was a specialist at moving money. It seems like there was some, schemes to offset taxes for certain clients of Bear Stearns, and that's what he specialized in, and that's the skill he learned. But beyond that, it's not exactly clear how he made so much of his money. We know he got a lot of it from Robert Black, or Leon Black later in his life, and also from Les Wexner beginning in the 1980s. Wexner even gave him a $77 million property, the most valuable property in Manhattan. But it's not really clear how he made a lot of his money in the early 80s, but he was associated with these figures in arms trafficking like Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi.
How were they connected?
So originally he's networking.
Yeah, but he's a college dropout. Something happens when he goes to Britain. We don't really know, but he gets connected with this crowd.
Do you have a suspicion?
It may have been through his daughter, Isabel Goldsmith. She's in the Black Book. It's hard to know. Also, Jacqueline Dupree was reportedly cultivated ties with sort of the New York Jewish community because she converted to Judaism in 1967. She was married, I think, to an Israeli musician, but she was close also to Itzhak Perlman, who's a famous New York musician. I think he's a violinist. I can't remember exactly what instruments he plays. Sorry. But he and Epstein had a pretty significant relationship also. But it's important to point out, when I say Epstein had a relationship with people, I'm not saying they had a sex blackmail relationship necessarily. What we're trying to untangle here is the truth of who Epstein was and why was he taken down. Because I don't think he was taken down because in 2019, all of a sudden, the U.S. government became outraged about the sweetheart deal of 2007.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. We're only given breadcrumbs and trails that we can make connections based on the evidence that exists, because there is a cover-up at the highest levels of government to cover up this sex trafficking ring that involves some of the most powerful people in the world that was likely part of a Mossad blackmail operation for Israel. Because of his connections to Israel, which are prevalent. She talked about Robert Maxwell. We know he had a connection to Ari Ben-Menashe, who was a Mossad asset himself, actually a Mossad agent himself, and said that Epstein told him he was engaging in blackmail. We know that he was good friends with Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, who himself was also the head of IDF intelligence, stayed at his house for prolonged periods. We know these connections exist, and I'm with her. This just wasn't about, coincidental rage toward Epstein in 2019 over what had happened with his crimes before. He had gotten away with everything up to then. And according to his lawyers, he was in high spirits at the time that, he supposedly killed himself.
12 years after the fact, and then wanted to rectify some wrong. I think it was about something else. He pissed off somebody, or, something similar that befell Robert Maxwell, for example. But anyway.
Stop becoming useful, too much heat.
Something. I have some theories. We can get to those later. But going back to early Epstein, so he's in this network with Jimmy Goldsmith, and he gets hired in 1974, which is the year he stops going to university for any reason. And gets hired at the Dalton School, which is this elite New York private school. And he's hired by Donald Barr, who's William Barr's father. Donald Barr had worked at the OSS, and which is the precursor to the CIA. And then after that, had been involved in all of these programs to identify gifted children when they were, high schoolers and things like that. And Epstein would have fallen in that category. We don't know if there was a connection there, but Epstein graduated high school like 2 years early. He was a math whiz, and also got a scholarship to go to Interlochen, where he would later return to Offend, actually, which is this kind of elite music school for really talented kids.
Yeah, Donald Barr was actually the father of William Barr, whose custody Epstein was in when he killed himself, actually, in 2019. And the crazy thing about Donald Barr, beyond his OSS connections, is the fact that he wrote a book. I think it was a few years after he hired Epstein to teach at the Dalton School with no credentials to do this. He wrote that space relations book about a planet ruled by oligarchs engaging in sex slavery. So this is the kind of book that Donald Barr, wrote, eerily foreshadowing the future history of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's really pretty uncanny if you look into this.
And I think he went there because he was good at the bassoon or something, but he was apparently really good at math and could play a lot of different instruments and was, reportedly very talented. And he obviously caught people's attention for some reason.
Was it Bear Stearns from there?
It was Bear Stearns from there. So,
Yeah.
it depends on who you believe about who hired him, but it was Ace Greenberg at the end of the day, who became CEO or the head of Bear Stearns, I think, in 1978. But there's a lot of people, there's a lot of baton passing here for responsibility, and I think that's kind of common now that Epstein is kind of an infamous character.
Yeah, one of the stories has it that he was a math tutor after he had taught at the Dalton School, and through that's how he met Ace Greenberg. But it still doesn't really make sense how this, operator of Bear Stearns hedge fund is going to hire Jeffrey Epstein for no reason, a guy that was kicked out as a failed math teacher because he was fraternizing with young female students of his, eerily so, that freaked some of them out. And he's on the fast track from the trade desk, which he didn't succeed at, to the money laundering side of Bear Stearns, and then becomes a partner in something like 4 years. Another unexplainable aspect of his life.
Right.
Yeah.
So the sister, allegedly it was the daughter of Ace Greenberg. She denies it. It was, she says it was some kid at school, one of her friends, another kid at school. Their dad was friendly with Greenberg and recommended Epstein to Greenberg. I don't know. There's all these different
To tutor math, supposedly, right?
stories, but there's an agreement that it was Greenberg that brought him to Bear Stearns.
Okay.
It's a little complicated, sorry, but basically, Epstein joins Bear Stearns in 76, and by 1980 he's like a limited partner. He has a very meteoric rise at the firm. Oh yeah. He was basically Greenberg's protege, and then he leaves in 1981. There's a lot of different stories there. But it seems like the most likely explanation is that there was this SEC investigation because the trade at the center of that investigation happens the day before Epstein resigns Bear Stearns. And the official story that he had been fined for not reporting something in the expense account appropriately, it doesn't really make sense with why he would leave a job as a limited partner, netting him a lot of money for a fine that was relatively small.
Yeah, there's other stories that he was improperly buying securities for his friends or something like that, and it wasn't actually related to the SEC, investigation. But either way, if you believe the SEC investigation explanation for why he left Bear Stearns, it was over, serving the client Edward Bronfman, who headed the Seagram's company.
And then you have other Bear Stearns executives and Epstein himself say, "Oh, I wanted to strike out on my own and make my own business." At that point, there again a lot of conflicting information. But the SEC case revolves around the Bronfman family, insider trading involving Seagram's. And a lot of other people that are sort of in this network. One of the guys involved in that insider trading scandal later becomes a big part of Jimmy Goldsmith's corporate rating in the U.S. and his acquisition of this company called Crown Zellerback, and which is part of this. I don't want to throw out too many names that confuses people. But Drexel, Burnham, Lambert, they're like the heart of a lot of the savings and loans and junk bond scandal, financial funny business going.
This is way more of a rabbit hole than I was anticipating. Let's just move on. I'll definitely check this out, though. This is an analysis of the downfall of the United States based on the history of France.
The people should always be held in the priority position when it comes to government. And throughout history, when we see that there is a failure to preserve those interests, that the consequences are usually quite grim. And all we need to do is look throughout history to see what happens when leadership fails to actually delegate action and pursue change for the people. It's often led to revolution. It's almost a constant at this point. Anytime people are pushed into scarcity and desperation, that revolution breeds from that sacred soil. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about revolution and how the parallels between pre-revolutionary France really does coincide with a lot of what we're going through today. This, of course, isn't to glorify revolution, because true revolution, true bloody revolution, is usually one of the most horrific things that a population can actually go through, because it is the people against the state. It is a peasant's revolt against the militarized government. And the levels of bloodshed during those times are usually quite profound. The first thing that we need to understand is that pre-revolution France had a caste system that really does resemble our country today. You had the first and second estate, you had the clergy, and of course the nobility, the swords and shields, those who inherited great wealth, those who held all the power in a country. And of course then you had the third estate, the commons, everyone else. If you're watching this right now, I guarantee that 99.99% of you are the third estate. Even though you think that you may be wealthy by your own standard, often to be in the first and second estate, it's simply one of birthright and not by meritocratic value. Because we need to understand that the third estate consisted of 97% of the French population at the time. And in a time like we have now, where the top 3% of our nation hold more wealth than the other 97% of our country, how are we so different? It may not be explicit, it may not be set in stone, but we do exist in a caste system today. In breaking free, breaking loose from that caste system is near impossible by the burdens that are actually placed on the common man. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Exorbitant debt that a nation holds places a burden on the people that is basically unbearable for the common man to actually bear. The lives of grandeur and spectacle and moral decay that those in the first and second estate get to experience will never be more than a dream or a scroll on Instagram to the common man. In that time, the first and second estate, the clergy and the noblemen, they were exempt from most taxes, meaning that that same tax burden, that massive debt that went to pay for the lives of the wealthiest people in that country, were paid for by the third estate, paid for by the common person. Much like life today, back then, life was just a constant and relentless cycle of labor and extraction. A litany of levies and taxes were placed on normal people to keep them from rising up, to keep them from actually improving their situations, their circumstances, their lifestyles, to keep them from actually being in the position where they had the free time to question the state, to question power. And that's no different than what we go through today with the amount of taxes that we pay as average, normal people in this country. Income taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, sales tax, property tax, tax upon tax. And then on top of that, the tariffs on...
Did he say income tax? Which is just, that's just theft.
Goods. This creates a kind of downward pressure where people just are kept below a certain state. A state that constantly experiences desperation. Imagine working from dusk till dawn.
It's not theft, but it's like, it feels like theft. Definitely feels like it. But I'm all about paying your fair share, but raising taxes when the core problems are not being addressed is not the way. I understand why Democrats lose on raising taxes here and there.
Your muscles are aching and your children's bellies are grumbling, only to see those profits being siphoned off to go to the wealthy. Sound familiar? Yes, it should, because that's exactly what's going on in our country today. And it's not to maintain any good system for the common man, it's just to provide wealth for an indolent class of people who produce nothing. This wasn't just financial hardship. This was a theft of very existence. To keep people in a state of labor where they had to toil day and night to keep their heads above water, while at the same time, the very act of living just became a cycle of continuous debt. Debt to an unseen and uncaring elite. What kind of moral obligation remains at that point? When the state, when the supposed protector becomes the greatest predator in the field, if the seeds of revolution are often watered by the tears of the exploited, then it's the fertilizer of the resentment that is caused.
The seeds of revolution are often fertilized by the tears of the oppressed? Of the exploited?
In the state, when the supposed protector becomes the greatest predator in the field, if the seeds of revolution are often watered by the tears of the exploited, then it's the fertilizer
watered by the tears of the exploited. Wow.
Of the resentment that is caused by the inaction and the oppression of the elite leaders within that system that cause revolution to grow. And it's that resentment that the powerful usually mistake for just simply grumbling. At that point, France was an absolute powerhouse. Its empire had stretched across the world. But at the same time, in pursuing that, its coffers ran empty, and the taxes they levied on the people in order to pay for more expeditions, to pay for more glamorous balls, to pay for the lives of people who hide behind walls, who live lavishly while they live in desperation. France was beautifully furnished, but had a mortgage that it just could not pay. And in an attempt to pay that, it just extorted its people. And they said, this is more than just a fiscal problem. This is a moral problem. To carry national power, to carry the mantle of a presidency as government representative is one where you place yourself as the guardian of the collective future of our nation. But at the same time, that future is gambled away at its very foundation. At that point, what legitimacy is still retained? If the nation is a great ship that's being steered by idiots and usurers and corrupt and bankrupt politicians and theocrats and oligarchs who have no interest in actually saving the people, at some point the people realize that that ship is sinking, but at the same time they're chained to that very ship. And all they can do is listen to the drums beat and the sounds of the whips crack as they row forward into their own demise. So as we see right now in this country, in the world that we're in, that history is being written page by agonizing page, and conflict is escalating. Because we need to understand that the most primal, most visceral feeling that anyone can experience in this life is hunger. And we are a nation that's becoming hungry. Things are becoming more expensive. Food is becoming more expensive. People can't afford groceries. People are using their credit cards and going into debt further and further, putting groceries on layaway just to provide for their families. But at some point, the costs go up to the point where you can't just go into debt, where you have to start skipping meals, where you have to start choosing who in a family eats. We think that this is a world away from where we are in this first world country, but it's not. A few bad economic moves can throw a nation into turmoil, and all the calls of divine right mean nothing to a man whose family is hungry. The spectacle, the grand gestures, the calls of promise and change mean nothing when your body is crying out for nourishment. There was no first round. There was no shot heard around the world that started the French Revolution. It was food getting expensive. It was poor harvest. And what happens in a country like ours, where we've decimated the agricultural labor force, where fields are filled with ripe fruit, but there's no one to actually harvest them? The prices go up and the shelves go empty. A scarcity enters the mindset of the people, and we get hungry. It wasn't a bullet that started the war. It was bread. Civilizations are built on bread. And in the absence of bread, civilizations often crumble. I know that this is a very hard thing for Americans to imagine, to comprehend. Imagine a world where the act of feeding your family becomes an insurmountable struggle, a source of constant and gnawing fear and anxiety. No matter how much you work, no many hours you put in, at the end of the day, you know that you'll not have enough to actually feed yourself, to feed your family. Try to put yourself in that situation. At some point, the bonds of loyal patriotism that were tempered in fear are broken by the mistakes and failures of our leaders. Because it isn't just a financial crisis. It can become a biological imperative simply to survive. And in that biological imperative, all the Enlightenment ideals mean absolutely nothing when your body cries out for nourishment. There's an old saying that the world is just 3 meals away from anarchy, 3 meals away from destruction, a collapse of civilization. Hunger is the natural imperative that drives us forward. Hunger was the natural imperative that drove the creation of civilization. The agricultural revolution started to stave off hunger, to make sure that people's families were fed, that they were fed, that there was safety and security, at least on the dinner table. But when that's gone, don't expect civility. Don't expect reason. Absent the restraints of modernity, people are animals. And this is something that we need to understand. A very safe life we live in America. The gilded cage, it may be a gilded cage, but it's a cage that's kept many of us very ignorant when it comes to how bad things can get. And the primal scream of society that's pushed past its endurance is a cry that any ruler can't ignore. Because understand that a dying man, in his last breath, his last burst of strength, will always reach out for freedom, always reach out for safety, always reach out to protect, not to serve. That's not how that works. That's against the biological imperative. That's actions through the confines of tyranny. Because we all know what happens. When people get hungry, it's just the third estate that gets hungry. The first and second, they still live in their opulent lives. This we've seen from CEOs coming out and saying that those at the top end of the socioeconomic spectrum are living great right now. This economy is just working for them. It's fantastic, but it's destroying the lives of many people who don't exist within that economic strata. It's throwing them into the kind of disparity and depression and state of survival that people have gone through in pre-revolutionary societies since the beginning of civilization. And the people are watching, as they do. Because just like France, what I see happening in America, in the face of egregious wealth inequality and egregious waste, the social contract shatters. And in that cry for such issues to be addressed, when it's dismissed, denied, or ignored, the people will cry out louder until they're done crying out. There's an illusion of purpose in voting in America right now. There's an illusion that it actually affects positive change for people. But all we've seen over decades is a steady decline that's reaching the crescendo now. We're reaching that tipping point where once we go over that, there's no coming back. And in that deep shadow that the common man actually finds himself in this country now, they look up and see new ballrooms being built in the capital. More egregious waste, more egregious spending, while at the same time they're asked to pay more taxes than ever before. In the face of one economic crisis after another, and they're just supposed to bear it. Be the burdened peasant who sweats and toils and breaks his back just for the profits to be siphoned off to the wealthy so that they can live the lives that you can only dream of. A starving population staring at a king's untouched feast is a population that is ready to explode. And I guess a warning should go out. Of course, for those who think that they belong in that second or that first estate, those who have risen up to a high degree of success through their meritocratic values, please understand that you'll never actually be accepted into that first or second estate. You just won't be. You don't belong. You're not born into it. You are useful at best, but in their eyes, never actually elevated past the position of a pawn.
That made me think of this. Right here. I waited 7 minutes out of this hour and 37 for any kind of pushback, waiting for him to say anything. He said nothing. Nothing. You will not be part of this fascist in-group. You are useful as a tool at best. Because here we have Nick Fuentes, an unapologetic Nazi, saying racist things about black people. You have nothing to say.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Monday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into. Big show. Our featured story, you've already seen it, and I'm sure you know all about it. We're going to be talking about the Ukrainian war refugee, a young woman by the name of Irina Zarutska, who boarded a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you know how the story goes. She sits down in
No, I don't know how the story goes.
front of a black man, and she gets brutally stabbed to death in the throat for...
Look how happy he is to report this information.
For no reason. Completely at random.
The more important a distinction to make, the only important distinction to make, is that she sat in front of a mentally ill person. His race has nothing to do with it. Do I even need to say that?
And this story has become sensational. Everybody's talking about it. It's all over social media. And the image, the picture, is worth 1,000 words.
What picture?
What did this...
Of the guy's mugshot?
Woman do to deserve this? You know, in many cases, when you look at crime, of course, all crimes are the fault of the perpetrator. But you can say, well, people need to be more aware of their surroundings. They went to the...
Dude, I saw a comment that was like, it's amazing talent how Nick's just able to riff for over an hour straight. It's amazing. Bro, he's starting to like, what is crime? Why does crime even happen? It's just... What's up, Vitor? Welcome. Glad to have you. Nick Fuentes, man. He says like 10 different racist things in this like 7 minutes.
Wrong neighborhood.
Not surprised. But like...
Many things can be said about why crimes happen, how to avoid being the victim of one. She walked.
He's just
on the train and sat down in front of a black guy. Death sentence.
God damn, dude. And where's the pushback, dude? Listen to this again.
First or second aristocratic values, please understand that you'll never actually be accepted into that first or second estate. You just won't be. You don't belong. You're not born into it. You are useful at best, but in their eyes, never actually elevated past the position of a pawn. And to pursue the approval of those who will never actually approve you, while at the same.
That's what you are, man. A pawn.
That was it. Walked on the train, sat down, stabbed to death in the neck for zero reason. And the photo's unbelievable. There she is sitting there with her headphones in on her phone. And there...
He's just repeating himself. Here in Brazil, Bolsonaro is being tried by the Supreme Court. The ministers are voting. We already have 2 votes for conviction. There are 3 ministers left to vote. Oh shit. Is this live right now? Or is this like a multi-day process? Two Brazilian Supreme Court justices on Tuesday voted. Alright, fine. It started yesterday. The trial resumes shortly. Okay. Wow, the 5-judge panel is now 1 vote away from a majority convicting Bolsonaro. I wish. Orchestrating an attempted coup to remain in power after his 2022 electoral defeat to leftist President Luis. I would never put it past Trump to try to do something like this. He literally did with January 6th, didn't he? To remain in power. We can learn as Americans from Brazilian politics right now. Like how to convict a former president, you know.
Same time, turning your back on your common man is just an egregious sin that is not often forgiven during times.
There's one more about the downfall of the United States that I wanted to watch. Yeah. Functional melancholic.
Have you noticed this feeling in the air? A low-grade tension, like the faint...
A little moodier version of the last video.
Smell of smoke in a building where the fire alarm never quite goes off. Or maybe...
I like your hat, dude. I love a good hat. It's a really nice hat.
the subtle smell of rot under the bed perfume. You walk down any major street in the U.S. and you'll see it in the eyes of the people pretending not to notice the growing tent cities pitched under the overpasses. And you'll hear it in the way conversations have basically turned into shouting matches about whose version of the facts are true.
Oh, this is 38 minutes
You'll
long.
taste it in the food that somehow costs twice as much while containing half as much food and even less nutrition.
Ooh, goddamn.
The roads crack your suspension. The bridges look like relics from civilization long gone. And it's not just the cracks in the sidewalk, it's the cracks in the soul.
All right. I appreciate what he's trying to do here, but I like my politics to be as dry as possible. I'm not into the poetry, you know. Let's lighten things up a little bit. What's going on here? Oop, too fast.
Bop, bop, bop. Hey.
Hey, how you doing, man? Hey.
What are you hiding there? What do you got? What do you got in your hand there? Open it. Open the hand. That's your breakfast? Does that...
Hey, what's that? Stop that. Put that down.
Seem like a good breakfast to you?
Did you ever think you could
cut your meat?
Did you ever think you could
Toilets. Stop. That's
It's the most cracked intro to a podcast I've ever seen.
so funny that PBD felt the need to put in there as like the first, what would we call it, verse of the PBD theme song. Adam, shut up, moron.
I know this life's meant for me.
Adam, shut up.
Boom. So, I don't know. I think every time it goes like this, notice the pattern with, and I don't want to go a lot with Epstein from your and Adam. I just want to move on to the next stories. If you have anything unique you want to say, tell me. If it's anything that's the same old.
The Epstein shit is just so funny. Because Vinny wants to talk about it, but PBD does not at all. And it's... PBD's got nothing to refute. He's just... anything that Vinny's saying is just... But Vinny is right, but he comes across insane. That's the beautiful dichotomy between them, is that, like, PBD seems tempered, but he's morally wrong, and Vinny is not morally tempered, not emotionally tempered, and he's out of his mind, but he's right.
This is not on my top 20 list. This is not this. We can just move on. I'll come to a different
Same
story.
old crap. Hey, Adam. Look, Adam, if it's the same old crap that you are, then just, just keep it shut. Remember the beginning of the song that I play where it tells you to shut your stupid trap? Maybe do that then.
But that's what I want you to be thinking about.
Yeah.
If it goes like this,
no, it does not.
Notice the Epstein story.
Okay.
It peaks. Then what does it do?
Jesus.
Dips.
Okay.
And then you say hoax.
Are you just watching Google Trends? What are you talking about, dude?
Boom. And it comes back up.
Yep. Okay.
So guess what? It's because you're the momentum.
Right.
Change the script.
Okay.
Give a different message.
Yeah. Giving a guy, basically giving a guy advice on how to make a pedophile ring story go away. Remember what this is about?
Change the script. Give a different message.
No. Patrick.
And let your guys do the part. Whatever you truly want to say it privately. Stop calling it a hoax publicly.
Okay. Yeah.
There's other things that we can go with. I just don't know if I like that approach that he's taking. Is there anything
giving
you
him
need
advice
to
on this? There's other things we could go with until this blows over. I mean, what the hell? I mean, what in the hell is going on with these goddamn guys here?
What the hell is going on with my goddamn boys here?
And did, like, a judge order them to keep talking about this or something? Because they clearly don't want to. They don't want to talk about this, and they have no idea what the hell to do. I get it. You've been promoting. I mean, it's not only promoting Trump, but like Trump is their guy, and now like every 20 minutes, there's a trending thing all over Reddit and the news and everything where it's like, oh, Trump made Jeffrey Epstein a sculpture, and it's of a child. And it says on it, secrets are fun. Do you not agree? And then part of the sculpture is him winking. By the way, what the hell are those letters? You know, I saw that a lot of people on YouTube and all over my main source of news, Reddit. There's all these like birthday letters that came out. You know, and you look at that and you're like, what the hell? What the hell is this crap? I mean, they're releasing all these like Jeffrey Epstein birthday letters. And if those are real, it's like, what the hell? What the hell is this? Obviously, there's stuff in there that just seems like cartoonishly incriminating, you know? But then it's like, this was for a birthday? What the hell?
What the hell is wrong with these lunatics?
I mean, even if there wasn't such an eyes wide shut vibe to those letters, even if it was like, I drew you a cartoon of you on the beach, man, you're 50.
I drew a cartoon with markers.
There's an adult woman giving you a massage on the beach and she's in a bikini. That's insane. But anyway, apparently there was some court order. Vinny got too many noise violation complaints or something. So as a community service, these guys have to talk about Jeffrey Epstein every episode because they clearly don't want to on their own. But like the way he's talking about this, like think about like what if there were a portable document format aisle living on like their block or something? Would they be like, look, man, you gotta stop talking about this. Hey, look, I know you're running that ring, man, but the more you talk about this, you gotta shut up. This is my main concern. You're talking about this too much. Okay, we're moving on to another story here with my newsman. Okay, many of you out there don't respect my newsman. I will find out who you are and you will be shadow banned. You will also be, what's like this subject of a shadow called? Foreground banned. If you don't cut the crap. If you don't
cut your meat.
But they're going to move on to another story here about Zoran. They're pissed off at him. They're like, hey, this guy didn't even write a birthday letter for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday where he drew a playground and he said, ooh, interesting, a delightful place of whatever. He didn't do that, so he doesn't have our vote, whatever the hell they say. But I did want to focus on this delightful interaction. I love this. Like every episode, there's something like this. And it's like, can we get like a super cut of this kind of little interaction that they have? Here we go.
Eric Adams denies that there was anything there. He's saying, what happened, Tom? He's saying there's anything
I'm
there.
waiting for you.
What's this one, Rob? This is the...
This is CNN reporting.
Tom, what the hell were you doing over there? Let's do that again. Hold on. You see, watch the eyes go over to Tom.
Eric Adams denies that there was anything there. He's saying, what happened, Tom? He's saying there's anything
I'm
there.
waiting for you.
What's this one, Rob? This is the...
It's kind of not... You know what? I'm on PBD's side on that. He just wants to know Tom's okay. Tom, what the hell are you doing? Are you all right? I like that. Hey, what the hell are you doing over there? You okay? Yeah, I was just waiting for you to talk. Oh, okay. But you're all right? What do you want, like an arepa or something? I could order it. No, go ahead, finish it. All right? If you're okay, man.
Next one I want to get to is...
Yeah, check in on Tom.
In regards to Mamdani and Eric Adams. It's a very interesting story what happened here. On Wednesday,
are those guys?
We read a poll that showed that if Curtis Sliwa,
definitely don't know that guy.
Eric Adams, and if those two stepped out the race,
right,
Cuomo, Andrew, would be beating Mamdani.
Oh.
And I was the poll, and I said, well, if that's going to be the case, someone's got to give Mayor Adams a job, and someone's got to give Sliwa a job at the White House. President Trump needs to make that phone call, and guess what happened? That's the story that apparently now is circulating. Eric Adams and White House in talks. We literally said this 2 days ago. In talks over Trump administration job as pressure mounts for New York City mayoral candidates to sink Zoran Mamdani. Okay?
Yeah.
Let me
Okay, this is a fascinating story here. Right here, my man.
Paul Davidson.
He's like, this is cool. This is cool, man. It is pretty cool, man. I mean, another way to describe this, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here. But another way to describe this is the president's going to bribe some guys with jobs to drop out of a race in the hopes that the corrupt nut job vote consolidates. And they just barely beat, by a couple points. Maybe, if they're lucky, by a couple of points, this idiot who everyone hates Andrew Cuomo, whose brother is like on YouTube thinking AI is real and all this crap. Well, you know, the president bribes guys with jobs in the hopes that this moron his dead body barely drags across the finish line. That sounds cool. And what is the guy who took like a second from writing? Dear Jeffrey, some secrets. A beautiful secret is a wonderful, whatever. A doll. He's writing on a doll. Dear Jeffrey, for your 50th birthday. When he took a break to do that, so when he takes a break to do that, he's helping out with this. And what is it all an effort to do? Make sure that the poor people don't get a grocery store and food deserts in New York. Mission accomplished. Good job. This is sort of like the Biden thing. When all those idiots, when all those losers who no one even remembers anymore, like dropped out to like, hey, go vote for Biden to give us a job, to like defeat Bernie Sanders. This is like, that's the funny thing about this too, is that these guys, like Adam and PBD and all these idiots, they do say this a lot. They're like the establishment. They're always talking about the establishment sucks. They never explain what that means. The establishment is anyone that's not Trump, I guess. But here you go. The entire corrupt establishment seems to be getting together, including the guy who took a break. Dear Jeffrey. Okay, no more of that. It's like basically the exact same things happening, which would reveal that they're just love another version of the establishment,
That's what happens.
So do you think, that being said, I agree. Do you think with Mamdani's rise right now, because he's climbing, do you think them leaving and Cuomo coming in, it'll be a close race?
Yeah, it's going to be a close race.
That's what we need.
I think it's going to be a very close race with
need a lot
the
of help.
involvement of one person.
DJT.
That's it.
Yep.
Cool,
Adam.
man.
I don't know. I'm actually with...
Now, what the hell is Adam gonna say about that son of a bitch? Did you ever think you could make it? Adam, shut your ass up. I love that intro song. Will Adam shut his stupid trap, that moron? However, I can't remember, but the intro song do like that. What the hell is at one of my favorites after PBD, Vinny, Rob, whoever the guest is, and then Tom, Adam's right there. So he's definitely one of my favorites. Go ahead, Adam.
Adam.
I don't know. I'm actually with Mamdani on this. I think this stinks to high heaven.
Whoa!
Trump made a famous line, it's a rigged system, it's a rigged system, it's a rigged system. This seems like a rigged system. Because in a democracy, you don't want to avert the will of the people. In a democracy, sometimes the politicians want to protect the people from the decisions that the people make. Sometimes you got to let the people make some damn bad decisions. And that's what needs to happen in New York City.
What is that jacket?
People in...
Ooh. Seriously, what is that jacket? Anyway.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel targeted senior Hamas leadership in Qatar yesterday, launching a military strike on Doha. Hamas says its top leaders there were considering a U.S. proposal for a Gaza ceasefire. Though they survived the strike, 5 lower-ranking members died in the attack. A Qatari security staffer was also killed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke after the strike.
At noon today, I convened the heads of Israel's security organizations and authorized a surgical precision strike on the terrorist chiefs of Hamas. These are the same terrorist chiefs who planned, launched, and celebrated the horrific massacres of October 7th.
Einav Zangauer, the mother of the Israeli hostage Matan Zangauer, condemned Netanyahu for the attack on Qatar.
I am trembling with fear. I am trembling with fear. It could be that at this very moment, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has essentially sentenced my Matan to death. Anyone who deliberately chooses to endanger my child's life is murdering him. Why does the Prime Minister insist on blowing up every small chance for a deal? Why?
World leaders condemned Israel's strike on Qatar, including France, Germany, Britain, and the European Union. Germany's chancellor called Israel's attack on Doha unacceptable, adding, quote, the war must not spread to the entire region, unquote. The president of the United Arab Emirates arrived in Qatar today. Jordan's Crown Prince Hussein is also set to visit. Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is expected to visit on Thursday. The White House said it warned Qatar prior to the attack, but Qatar said it only received notice from the U.S. as its capital was being hit by Israeli strikes. Speaking to reporters yesterday. President Trump said he was, quote, very unhappy about Israel's attack. On social media, Trump wrote, quote, I view Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the U.S. and feel very badly about the location of the attack, Trump wrote. Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said yesterday Qatar's mediation efforts were central to its identity and that the Israeli attack would not deter its diplomatic role.
The Israeli attack that took place today on Qatari soil, we cannot call it anything other than state terrorism practiced by someone like Netanyahu in the context of these systematic policies and his ongoing attempts that have destabilized regional security and stability. It's simply a clear message to the region as a whole.
Israel continues to bomb Gaza City, ordering the full evacuation of the city's residents to the so-called safe zone of Al-Mawasi, which it has bombed repeatedly. Around 800,000 Palestinians are already sheltering there. Israel has targeted it at least 109 times, killing
Look at all the tents to the left.
Palestinians are already
Look at them.
Sheltering there. Israel has targeted it at least 109 times, killing over 2,000 people, according to Gaza's government media office. Residents in Gaza City say they have no safe place to go.
We are attempting to delay death a little longer. We have been displaced approximately 30 times, moving from one death to another, but we are trying to postpone death a little. What is the fault of these children? Why is this happening to this child and that one? Oh, Arabs, Muslims, negotiators, please find a solution for us in any possible manner.
Al Jazeera is reporting Israeli attacks have killed 20 Palestinians in Gaza today, including 15 displaced people sheltering in tents west of Gaza City. In the past 24 hours, 5 more Palestinians have starved to death, including a child. Meanwhile, a BBC investigation has found members of an anti-Islam biker gang, the Infidels Motorcycle Club, is working in Gaza for UG Solutions, which is providing armed security for the shadowy U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. According to the United Nations, 1,135 Palestinians have been killed seeking food near GHF aid sites. In the occupied West Bank, Israel ordered the demolition of the homes of 2 Palestinian gunmen who opened fire at a bus stop in Jerusalem, killing 6 people. Israel also announced it's revoking the work permits of hundreds who live in the villages where the men lived. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said in the wake of the attack, more Israelis would be eligible to receive licenses to carry guns. Organizers of a Gaza-bound aid flotilla say another one of their ships was attacked by a suspected drone while docked in Tunisian waters. The British ship sustained some fire damage on its top deck. It was the second such attack on the flotilla in recent days. The global Samud flotilla is preparing to leave soon to Gaza in an attempt to break the Israeli blockade. Passengers include the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg and Nelson.
Wait, so it was another drone attack? So the boats have been firebombed twice. Many times has the Samud flotilla been attacked? Back-to-back nights. And neither one of them were a flare. Shot from the same vessel. Get the fuck out of here. Brazen attack. Piracy.
Mandela's grandson, the South African MP Mandla Mandela. Activists with the group Code Pink disrupted President Trump's visit to a D.C. restaurant Tuesday night. The activists managed to get within feet of the president while holding banners and chanting, "Free D.C., free Palestine, Trump is the Hitler of our time."
Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free D.C., free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free D.C., free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free D.C., free Palestine!
What was that? I'm not going anywhere. They don't answer to you.
Trump was attending the dinner with Vice President.
Are you president of the restaurant? Shut the fuck up.
J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Take a seat.
Pete Hegseth, who is now referred to officially as Secretary of War, and other officials. The Nepali army has deployed troops to the streets of Kathmandu to quell massive youth-led anti-corruption protests that have left at least 22 people dead. On Tuesday, protesters set fire to the parliament and other government buildings. The protests continued even after the government lifted its ban on social media platforms, as well as the resignation of the Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli. Protesters who gathered outside the parliament said Nepal needs new leadership.
Everything that has happened is not because of the social ban. We need a young...
Dude, there was... This thing with Nepal is... bonkers. videos here.
You don't belong, you're not born into it. You are useful at best, but in their eyes, never actually elevated past the position of a pawn. Contract, no matter what. No matter how much it's failed, at least I'm alive. But at some point, that illusion of impossibility.
Oh, it was an ebb and flow video. I think it's this one.
We're gonna take it there. We're gonna take it there. We're gonna take it.
Interesting ways. She's breaking from them on Israel. She's breaking from them on Epstein. She's one of the Republicans who is putting pressure on Congress to release the Epstein files and this kind of like populist renegade.
Electricity, electricity, you know what's in the air, 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 it's possibility, it's possibility.
Appeared on TYT to discuss another amendment that she is introducing for a military spending bill that is nearing being passed in the House. It's, you know, going through the rounds of Congress, so I'll explain all of that, like where we are in the process. But TYT and Cenk have had Marjorie Taylor Greene on a couple times now. It seems that Cenk feels that she fits into this kind of like populist renegade, you know, nonpartisan type of coalition that he supposedly wants to build. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an interesting specimen because she is one of the most vociferous MAGA voices historically, and yet lately she's been breaking from them in some interesting ways. She's breaking from them on Israel. She's breaking from them on Epstein. She's one of the Republicans who is putting pressure on Congress to release the Epstein files and kind of flouting what Donald Trump wants. So obviously most people, you know, on the left understand that somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene is not to be trusted, as well as Cenk wanting to play footsie with more and more people like this, and it seems very suspicious. But let me play just a little clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about this amendment and why she introduced it, and then I'll get into some of the details about how this works, what exactly the political dynamic is here. I have a lot to say about this, so I'll just get right to the video for now, and then we'll get into that in a sec.
This week here in Congress, we're doing the National Defense Authorization Act, which is our annual funding for our military. And our military budget should be very focused on our country, on our military, and strictly for defense purposes. However, once again, there is funding for foreign countries, foreign causes, foreign aid, and foreign defense of foreign nations. And so
strike on a boat out in international waters, which supposedly had some drug traffickers on it, but we don't know because all of the evidence, whatever evidence would have been on the boat, is destroyed and lost at sea. And also there's some reports that there were enough people on this boat that it draws question to whether or not this is a drug smuggling boat, because if you have a ton of people on a boat, it's more likely that you're transporting the people than drugs. And so even if that was some kind of illegal operation to, you know, bring people across, there are things like that where, you know, people get paid to traffic immigrants into the country because that's the only way that those immigrants have to get into the country. And it seems more likely that that is who Trump blew up. But either way, they're trying to build up military presence in different places in the Caribbean. I have a friend who lives in the Virgin Islands on St. Croix, and he said that the airport there is being clogged up by military planes. So they're threatening to do strikes in Venezuela. Trump is saying that he is considering that, and Pete Hegseth has also made some gestures about that as well. So they are trying to threaten military force on Venezuela in order to get them to politically acquiesce. And if they don't, it's likely that we'll see some kind of military action in Venezuela. This is another example of Trump trying to use the U.S. military in every possible vector that he can. He's just trying to push troops out there. He will put troops on the ground in multiple countries if he feels like that is going to benefit the leverage of the United States. The reality is that it's not. It's going to hurt our leverage across the world. But the last thing I'll mention is Nepal. So Nepal has erupted in unrest that could very well lead to revolution. Essentially, what happened is the government did a social media ban on many companies, including Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, and they said that it was because these companies don't go through the government and register themselves with the government, but the people took this as a signal to revolt against the government. So there's other factors here. There's a lot of resentment in Nepal about inequality, the wage gap, as well as nepotism. There's a sense that the children of leadership in Nepal live these lavish lifestyles while the rest of the people are, toiling away. And so that has laid the groundwork for then what became the powder keg moment of the social media ban, which people took essentially as a symbol of corruption and also government repression. So people revolted, they set the parliament on fire. There's some crazy videos coming out.
Dude, this is what I wanted to show you. They set the parliament on fire, dude. Like, the Nepalese are not fucking around.
Here's video of protesters inside the president's house, and this is after the prime minister already resigned and the president resigned shortly after. So the government of Nepal has already succumbed to the demands of these protesters, and yet the unrest rages on. The social media ban was also already reversed. So the military is going to try to get control of this. Many people have been killed in Nepal already. They've been openly shooting at the protesters, as well as the protesters really getting to the core of their country's government and tearing it apart. So what's going to happen in that country from here? We don't know. Some people are saying that this is like a US-backed revolution meant to install some kind of crony like they usually do. I don't think that's true. I don't think this is US backed at all. Does not mean that they will not use it as an opportunity to install some kind of crony, and the Trump administration has definitely signaled that they're in favor of regime change. But overall, this is an example of how unrest gets laid by the general conditions of society that everyone's aware of. Everyone's aware of inequality. People are aware that, the children of people in parliament live so much better. They live lavish lifestyles, and it gets sort of paraded around and rubbed in your face. That's the kind of thing that makes people upset. And then there's something that happens that acts as essentially a trigger that causes things to explode. And this is how unrest happens in countries. And if we were to see some version of this in the United States, it would probably be fueled by outrage from people that are supportive of the president or feel betrayed by the president, rather than people on the opposite side, the Democratic side, the leftist side. Doesn't mean that at that point, those entities would then have some participation, specifically the left, not really the Democrats. But point being that general unrest that gets kind of like pushed and suppressed under the surface explodes when there is some kind of outrageous event that happens. Think the video of George Floyd that went viral in 2020. Those are the kinds of things that spark revolutionary action. And while we're not at this point in America yet, the combination of the Epstein files, Donald Trump wanting to go to war with every country despite selling himself as the anti-war candidate, and things like that are what's laying the groundwork for what could spark into revolutionary conditions very quickly. And that's why I say it's important to keep track of how the political conversation is changing and moving, and where people are falling on different sides of these arguments, because any one of these different debates, especially on war and Jeffrey Epstein, could cut to the heart of what could cause Americans to truly explode.
So keep an eye out for that catalyst, and keep your wits about you. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for tuning into the stream if you caught it live. If you're in the VOD gang, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you want to support the channel. And, free Palestine. Fuck Israel. Take care, y'all.